Great. Well, welcome to our Bat Talk tonight, and welcome to the Museum Reach, which is the portion of the river that you're sitting on. This project was completed in May of 2009, and that's when this bat colony was first discovered that we're going to be talking to you about tonight. So we're going to be introducing you to a little bit about bats, a little bit of their background, some about this specific colony. But first, we have a prize to give away, and that is a bat house kit. Now, we put a map of the Museum Reach underneath one of the chairs, although I don't think that anyone is sitting in it currently. So, if we can, if people want to kind of look around the chair next to you or underneath the seat. We have a winner! Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Well, we have our winner, and now I'm going to turn it over to Matt. I guess I should have introduced myself first. I'm Mara, and I'm with the San Antonio River Authority, and this is Matt with Texas Parks and Wildlife.
How y'all doing? Y'all having fun yet? Probably not. There's no bats yet. Anyway, my name is Matt Reedy. I'm a wildlife biologist with Texas Parks and Wildlife. This is kind of a joint venture between San Antonio River Authority and Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. When we first found out about this colony, when they first constructed this part of the Riverwalk, Matt Driffel, who's with San Antonio River Authority, he's a friend of mine. He came up to me and said, "Hey, we have this bat colony. I'm kind of interested in doing some educational programs with it." I said, "Great, I'm happy to help." So here I am. Matt is actually not here. He's vacationing today. So we have a much better looking person instead. So much better. I prefer her over him. So anyways, we're going to talk a little bit about bats. I will tell you all that we're going to cut this a little short. The bats have been coming out pretty early. So pretty much we're going to talk until they start coming out, and then we're going to duck so y'all can see. Okay? So first off, does anybody know what is a bat? Is it a flying mouse? What about a bird? No? What is it? They are a mammal. They are warm-blooded, but they're in their own order. Okay? They're called Chiroptera, okay, which means hand wing. Okay? They are the only mammals that can have powered flight. Okay? You know about flying squirrels, they can only glide. But a bat can actually flap his wings and he can fly. Okay? Which is very, very cool. It's the only group of mammals that can do that. Okay, so that's pretty neat. They're not a flying mouse, they're not a bird, what have you. They're very, very different. Some other unique things about bats that you've ever heard of echolocation. They actually use sounds. Okay, they make high-pitched sounds, and they listen to how that sound bounces off an object, like that wall or my hat, and they can actually tell what that object is, so they know not to fly into it. So they can actually see their world through sound, which is pretty cool. They do have eyes, they're not blind, they can see relatively well, but when it's pitch dark at night and they're hunting, they need another way to see. So they actually use sounds to be able to see. Another interesting thing is you know how our knees kind of go like this, right? Well, bats, theirs are the opposite. So their knees go the other way. So they can actually hang on to the walls and things like that. So another thing that's pretty cool about bats. Bats are very important ecologically and economically, actually. A lot of the bats that we have here in Texas, they do a very big favor to farmers. Moths cause a lot of damage to crops. Well, a Mexican free-tailed bat, which is what we have here, they can actually eat almost their body weight in moths every day. Okay, every night they go out to go after moths, they eat almost their body weight. So that's a lot of moths. Let me get out my cheat sheet because I don't remember the number, but I believe it is, one bat eats about 24 moths per night, and Bracken Cave, which is nearby, has, I believe it's 20 million. I don't know if it's more than that now, but they'll eat about 120 tons of moths per night. That's a whole lot of moths. That's billions of dollars in damages saved to farmers. Okay, so that's ecologically, they're pollinators. Certain bat species will help pollinate plants. They'll do a lot of other things. They're very, very important economically and ecologically. Anyone here like mosquitoes? Some bats actually eat mosquitoes too. That's pretty neat, huh? Good, good. Well, like I said, we're cutting this pretty short because we don't want to be talking when the bats come out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand this over back to Mara and let her talk a little bit more about different bat species that we have in the world.
Okay, so bats are a really exciting group of organisms to study because there are so many of them out there. There are over 1,200 species, so 1,200 different kinds of bats in this world. And they live on all continents except for Antarctica. So they're pretty widespread. Now the greatest number of bats, the greatest number of types of bats live in the tropics because there's a lot more different kinds of food sources that are available year-round there. But we do have a lot of bats in the temperate zones, and San Antonio is sort of a little in between, but we tend to have a lot of those temperate species that the north has. And these bats are very diverse. The largest bat, its wingspan is as tall as I am. It's called the flying fox, and it can be found in Asia. The smallest bat is actually the size of your thumb and weighs the same as a penny. So those are very different, and there's all things in between, and so it's a very exciting group. Now I want to tell you a little bit about this bat species, just in case we run out of time. I figure you should at least know what kind we have here. And this is a species called the Mexican free-tailed bat. And Mexican free-tailed bats have a lot of cool things, a lot of cool features, and one of the features is that they roost. The males and the females roost in separate colonies. So there's something called a maternal colony, which would be, an example would be Bracken Cave. They tend to be a lot larger. That has 20 million bats. And that's where mothers go when they're going to have pups, which is the name for their babies. And they go to those caves, and they're all in one location. Well, the male bats and the females that aren't having pups, that are too young to have pups, they live in colonies that are called bachelor colonies. And the colony that we have in the I-35 bridge is an example of one of those. They tend to be smaller, tend to be more in the thousands, and some can even be hundreds or even fewer than that. So that's one cool thing about the Mexican free-tailed bat. As Matt mentioned, they are insectivorous, which means that they eat insects and primarily moths, and they do a big favor to farmers in this area, as he mentioned. Something else that's cool about them is they don't live in the I-35 bridge year-round. They're a migratory species. They're a species that prefers to live in warmer climates, which San Antonio is definitely a good place for them. But during the winter times, for most of them, it gets to be a little too cold. And so a lot of them migrate to Mexico and to Central America in that area during the winter time. So the most likely time that you will find them is between April and October in these bridges that we have here. So that's our Mexican free-tailed bat. They're pretty exciting, and you can read more about them online. There's lots of information about them. But I want to tell you a little more about some other really cool kinds of bats out there that we don't see as much in Texas. So we talked about bats that eat insects, and there's lots of bats that eat insects. They eat them out of the air, and there's some that grab them right off of trees or off of the ground. There's actually bats that eat cockroaches too. That's pretty cool, right? Okay, so does anybody have any ideas of what other things you think bats eat? Another kind of bat. A fruit? Fruit is exactly right. There's a lot of bats that live in tropical areas because fruit grows there year-round, and it's a reliable food source, and they eat fruit. And something that's really cool is that there's actually some plants that have adapted themselves, they've evolved to be tied to those bats. And so their fruit tastes a certain way that attracts bats to them. They hang from the plant in a way that's easy for bats to grab them. And they're actually really important for bats. They spread those seeds of those fruits. Unlike birds, which tend to take a piece of fruit-eating birds, they tend to sit in one place and eat, and then the seeds kind of drop right there. Bats, they tend to move away from the plant, because if they hang around the plant, there's a chance that predators could be nearby to eat them. And so they move away from the plant, and they take the seeds with them. And so they spread those plants to other places. In fact, pigs they're mostly rely on bats to spread them into new places. Good, so fruit. Who's got another idea? What else do bats eat? do you think? Meat. Okay, that's great. So there are bats that eat other animals. And we talked about the ones that eat insects, right? But I'm guessing you want to know about other kinds of things they eat, right? Okay, so there's some that are carnivorous that eat things like frogs and birds and other bats. There's actually one species of bat that specializes in the call of a frog. So it lives in tropical areas where you have poisonous frogs and non-poisonous frogs. And it knows what the call of the non-poisonous frog is and will go after those frogs. So there's some like that. There are fish-eating bats. Anybody know this? And they have a cool adaptation too. They use echolocation like the bats that catch insects. But what they do is they detect tiny little ripples in the water where the fish are moving at the surface. And then they've got these big claws, and they come down and swoop and catch that fish out of the water. So there's some that eat those too. Okay, I need another guess, and it's related to meat. Does anybody have an idea what it might be? Blood. Oh, I thought that was going to be our first one. Those are usually the most famous. The vampire bats. And you want to know something? They have this big reputation. You know how many of those 1,200 species are vampires? 3. Just 3. And 2 of them, they primarily feed on birds. So there's one species left, and it's not found anywhere near here. It's about 100, the farthest that range comes is 150 miles south of the U.S.-Mexico border. So we don't have vampire bats here. So you want to hear a little more about vampire bats? They have some pretty cool adaptations too. One thing that they have are special teeth. You'd think you'd need pretty special teeth to feed on blood, right? So they have these teeth that are really sharp and they kind of stick out at an angle. And they use that to cut their prey. Well, somebody tell me what happens when you get a cut, like you scrape your knee or something. What happens to it? Does it just continue, just keeps going? What happens? It clots, that's right. So do you think this could be a problem for a bat if they make like a little cut and then it heals up before they get a chance to drink any blood? That'd be a problem, right? So what they do is they actually have something that's called an anticoagulant, which is something that keeps blood from clotting. And they have it in their saliva, and when they put a slash in the thing that they're feeding on, they insert some of this anticoagulant, and this has been very useful. Matt talked about all the economic and ecological importance of bats. This anticoagulant of vampire bats was used to develop the drug Draculant. So it's used for humans. And so because of research on these bats, they were able to come up with this new medical pharmaceutical product. So pretty cool, huh? Another cool thing about bats, now this bat colony, you'll notice that it's up high, right? Where they roost is up high. And the bats, most bats, when they want to fly, now they do have true powered flight, but what they do is they have to kind of drop a little bit to gain some speed before they can take off. So that's why they roost up high, so that they have a little area to drop before they start flying. Vampire bats are one of the only species of bats that can stand on the ground and jump and start flying from the ground. So that's another cool thing about them. Okay, there's one other major group of bat feeders. Anybody have an idea? Anybody have let's see. They're more on the fruit side of things than the meat side of things. Well, seeds get consumed as part of fruit. How about, think along the lines of, what do butterflies and hummingbirds eat? They eat from flowers. That's right, they eat pollen and nectar from flowers. And there's some bats that are specialized to eating from flowers. And they have really long noses so that their noses can stick in flowers, and they have a real long tongue so they can scrape out all that pollen. And there are some flowers, or some plants that have actually become adapted also to bats eating them, and they're required for pollination. And those flowers, when do you think they open if they're adapted to bats? At night. That's right. That's right. Okay, so that's all I'm going to talk about feeding strategies. We're going to take some questions on bat myths. If anybody has some questions, we'll do our best to answer. And yeah. Yes.
Bats are warm-blooded. They're mammals. Okay, they give birth to live young. They have fur, so they are warm-blooded. So what we want to hear now is everybody always, you hear a lot about bats. We want to hear about some myths, what you guys know about bats before you came and listened to us. Anyone have anything? Throw it out, something you think that you've heard about bats before. Stick in your hair. Are bats going to fly into your hair? Well, I talked a little bit about echolocation, right? Well, bats are pretty intelligent, and they have a very, very sophisticated system using that sound to be able to move through an environment. But they are pretty curious too. So they may come by and look at you, but if they can catch a moth flying in the air, do you think they can dodge your beehive wig? What do you think? Definitely. So they generally aren't going to want to fly into your hair. They may come and check you out. Maybe if you've got some flies buzzing around you or something like that. But no, they're just coming to check you out. They're not going to stick in your hair. Suck human blood. Well, we talked a little bit about the vampire bats. There are some species of vampire bats that do drink blood. That's how they survive. But the nearest bat is 150 miles south of our Texas borders. That's a long way south of here. And what they actually do is they're going to actually lick up that blood. So they're not going to come to your neck with big old fangs and stick it in and suck your blood. No, they're not going to do that. They're going to wait till a critter is sleeping, be it a cow, a sheep, or a chicken, something like that, and they'll make a little cut and they'll lap up that blood. So they're not going to come in there and latch onto your neck. Any other ones? Yep, they do. A lot of bats are nocturnal. We do have a group of bats called the Megachiroptera, which were those mega is large, those really large fruit-eating bats. Those guys actually are diurnal. They come out during the day. But your other bat species that do eat insects and fish and things like that are nocturnal. They come out during the night, and that's when they use echolocation, because that's an advantage. When they're out during the day, there's a lot of predators out there that can maybe be able to outfly them or find them. But if they go out at night, all those predators are sleeping. Your falcons, your hawks, things like that. So that there's some advantages for them to use their echolocation at night and fly in the pitch dark, and they'll be a lot safer that way. Anything else? Any other questions, concerns? Are they protected? The way the laws are right now is you cannot destroy a roost. You can't keep a bat as a pet. You can't go out and shoot a bat. No, you cannot do that. They can try to close up a roost to keep bats out of places, but that's generally when the bats are gone, like in the winter. But yeah, if you see a bat, you don't want to go out there and shoot it, anything like that, or try to handle the bat. Like I said, you want to try to leave them alone because you don't want to have any problems with rabies or anything else like that.
When you talk about roosting, how it is that they roost?
No, they don't. Actually, this bridge is very interesting. What you have is you have expansion joints. So you have big pieces of concrete, okay? And they actually casted that concrete somewhere else. And then they brought it in to build the bridge. And when they put them together, concrete shrinks and swells. And so they leave a little gap in between the big pieces of concrete. And so what the bats actually do is they will actually go up in those cracks, in between those big pieces of concrete, and they'll be able to crawl up on the sides, and they will, when they're roosting, they're not building any kind of nest, they're actually just hanging on the sides there.
That beam is hollow.
Is it hollow?
It's hollow.
Yeah, it is hollow, but it's actually that specific gap within those, between those two, those beams is what's the most important part for the bats. What are we looking for? Oh, hi. They're actually going out to feed. So they're looking for insects. So they're going to actually go out and they're going to try to they're going to be looking for insects to feed on. They're probably going to fly towards your agricultural fields outside of the city. So they can fly very, very long distances at night. They will return. Yep, they'll return before daylight at the latest, but generally sometimes they'll catch enough moths and they'll be done, and they'll come back to bed just like us. We don't want to work a full 8-hour day. We'd rather just work an hour or two than go home, right? Don't you wish we could be a bat? It depends on the wind. A lot of that depends on the wind. Just like a bird, most flying critters want to fly into the wind. So depending on the wind and depending on which direction, here we go, guys.